Welcome back to the Pleb Underground. I hope you guys had a great weekend. There was a whole lot of drama that happened over the weekend. Guys, I am your host, Phil, and we are going to dive into all the fun that happened. So as you guys know, on Friday, did an interview, so didn't really get to, cover the news. So I've got a bunch of news left over from Friday and, of course, the fun drama that happened over the weekend. So let's dive into what we are going to be taking a look at. Hines steps down, right? Kind of interesting. Some people kind of wondering, never really heard of this guy before, and then all of a sudden he shows up, and now he's gone. Kind of interesting. We'll take a look at that. For the people that aren't really familiar with the solo mining, right, or the Bitaxes, there's a bit of drama in the OSMU community, and we're going to take a look at that. I'm not really sure what to think. I do know some people who work closely with that community. I know of one Bitcoiner that I believe is really heavily tied into that community. And I don't know. I never got the impression that it was scammy. But anyways, look, I digress. We're gonna show some information about what's going on with OSMU, and we'll see where we go from there. Anyways, also as well, you guys probably saw a bunch of posts about how the yeah, that's right, Jake Thomas. Bo went home, man. He gone. I don't know what happened. He gone. They've replaced him. Anyways, going back to the U.S., right? There's been some articles, especially from TFTC, even Bitcoin Magazine, showing that the gold is the U.S. government is revaluing their gold, and of course, right, the Bitcoin hopium cheerleaders immediately start with the whole, "That's it, we're selling our gold for Bitcoin." And guys, look, I'm a Bitcoiner. Of course, I want these things, right? Of course, I want all of this stuff to go away, and I want them to only hold Bitcoin, and I want everyone to only be obsessed with Bitcoin. However, I don't want to wreck myself. So I need to be honest with myself about what is actually happening. So we're going to dive into that, because that whole revaluing gold thing, it's not really what the hopium dealers are selling you. Not even close. Steak and Shake hopium. That's right, guys. Steak and Shake's numbers are up. Also, we're going to take a look at the Harvard news as well. That's right, because Harvard's now a believer. What a surprise. What a surprise. What does that mean, though? What does that mean for Bitcoin? Anyways, guys, as you can see, we got a lot of stories to dive into. We are going to do it, and we will be right back in just 20 seconds. Of course, right? We've got to give some love to the Pleb Underground sponsor. Then we'll dive right into it. Here we go. Pleb Underground is sponsored by Archimedes Emporium. Discover the pinnacle of precision engineering, starting with their Bitcoin logo wall clock, meticulously machined in Maine from a solid block of aerospace-grade aluminum, ensuring unparalleled durability and performance. Experience the difference of a product made without compromise. Head on over to Archimedes Emporium. Okay, moving right on over into the Bo Hines story. We're going to start off first with this quick little clip of Bo just making us all feel really good about what's coming, right? What's going to happen.
We delivered on the president's promises that he made on the campaign trail. The president was adamant about creating the SBR. We wanted to make sure that we did it right in a way that respected Bitcoin for being so unique. And also gave credence to innovation in other spaces of the digital asset world. So, for us here, we look at Bitcoin, it's not a security, it's a commodity. It has intrinsic stored value that's traditionally accepted. It has, as David likes to describe, the immaculate conception. There's no issuer. And, that's why, as you saw in the executive order, we compared this to digital gold. It's something that's imperative for the United States to have, retain, continue to build on. And I think that's worth pointing out that, the way that this is constructed, we talked about ways of acquiring more Bitcoin in budget neutral ways that won't cost the taxpayer a dime. And what I like to say about this president, I think it's high time that our president started accumulating assets for the American people, which is what President Trump is doing, rather than taking it away. And I think that's one thing that we really wanted to make clear in this executive order. And we're looking forward to working with our partners at Treasury and the Secretary of Commerce in order to find those budget neutral ways in which we can acquire more. I've been asked all the time, it's like, how much do you want? And I said, well, that's like asking a country, how much gold do you want, right? I mean, as much as we can get.
Sounded great, right, guys? I mean, sounded great. I was excited. Didn't really get much of what he was talking about, though, right? Like all of that wonderful stuff, all of that feel good, type of hopium. What did we end up really getting? Not really much of any of that, right? It's again, it's no surprise, right? That they're politicians. He's a politician. Even if they're not a politician, if you've actually ever worked in a large enough corporation, your management starts to sound like politicians, right? Because they have to placate their bosses, but keep you doing the work, right? So becomes a bit of a juggling act. Politicians are no different, right? I've said this before, we're just watching a show. So of course, right, on August 9th, we were all surprised after hearing all these wonderful words. Hey, they're going to figure out something budget neutral. We're going to be getting Bitcoin, but it's not going to cost a penny to the taxpayers. We could totally believe that. And of course, we ended up getting this particular post from Bo Hines, right, on the 9th, serving in President Trump's administration and working alongside our brilliant AI crypto czar, David Sachs, is executive director of the White House Crypto Council, has been the honor of a lifetime. Together, we've positioned America as the crypto capital of the world. You'll notice it's got nothing to do with Bitcoin, right? So in that interview, he talked a lot about Bitcoin. He talked a lot about Bitcoin's qualities. But here it's all crypto, right? Because it's all about stable coins. It's all about crypto. It's all about the crap that they can control. I love this community and what we've built together. As I return to the private sector, I look forward to continuing my support for the crypto ecosystem as it thrives here in the US. So this was an interesting take that I thought, and I wanted to share. It's not that I necessarily agree with it, but I do think that it's important to point out. So here we go. I'd like to remind you of something. This is from George Bodine. I'd like to remind you of something. There is no legislation passed for the U.S. to actually acquire Bitcoin. This is true. Okay, they haven't bought one effing sat. That's also true. Now, the spokesman who attended every conference, every interview that asked to repeatedly assure the U.S. wanted as much Bitcoin as it could get and said he didn't want to poison the well by disclosing how they could do that, has resigned. There has been no gold audit, also true. No audit of Bitcoin, also true. The only thing that we know is what the Marshal Service got, and we got that from Lola Leets. Okay, and the Epstein files, right? The Epstein list. Well, the Epstein tapes were never released, but the list is also not released. And of course, anybody who even mentions this type of stuff, that you're just made fun of immediately, right? There's some crazy extremists, and whatever. Honestly, it's. Guys, I've said this before. We're just watching a show. It's like these people are like paid actors. Now, something Predator brought up, which I thought was pretty interesting, and I understand a lot of people think that Predator is a hater. Okay, however, right, even though he may be seen as a hater, he also does offer some information that, in my perspective, I think is useful. I didn't know about Bo Hines' dad, Todd Hines, entrepreneur. So I like his take on this one. Bo Hines popped up out of nowhere and landed a White House job as advisor to the crypto czar. And since he was so unqualified, we all thought he had to be somebody's kid, which to a certain extent, I can't disagree with that. I had no idea who he was. But then again, I also don't pay attention to mainstream media very much. So it doesn't surprise me that I had no idea who he was. Anyways, so here's his dad, and who could have guessed it? He's a shitcoin grifter. And yep, there you go. Strike is an exciting project, which of course, guys, this strike has nothing to do with Jack Mahler's strike. This is just some crapto project. Does it have anything to do with what we saw with Bo Hines? I don't think so. I'm not saying that none of this is related at all, but I just don't really think I don't really think the grand scheme was to get Bo Hines in the office in order to be able to pump his dad's bags. I just don't buy that. I think if anything, maybe, think of it as like a notch on the belt, right? Once you get to say that you've worked in the White House, think of how that looks on your resume per se, right? Think of the perception that gives other possible, let's say customers, right? Maybe maybe colleagues that you're going to work with in the future. All of a sudden you get to say you worked with, you worked at the White House and you had this high up of a role. Let's be honest, right? The perception of your stature is greatly amplified, so of course. Yeah, I just don't think it's, I don't know, like I'm not convinced of the tinfoil hat take that, Bo Hines was placed there so that his, father can show some tokens. And I'm not suggesting that Predator said that. I'm just saying, these are the kind of weird situations that we see. I just think that, again, none of us are better than our incentives, right? Bo saw it as a way to move his station up and solidify maybe his position in the future. And of course, to his father, right, who is an advisor to the shitcoin company. Well, he also gets to win on this, but I don't think there's some grand conspiracy on that. Anyways, okay. Moving on, right? The revaluing gold. This is probably the funnest one that I dove into. So here we go. This is a post from TFTC. A few other Bitcoin quote unquote news outlets also floated this for the clicks and the views. Fed floats idea of funding a strategic Bitcoin reserve by revaluing gold. That's not true at all. It's actually not true at all. One day later, Trump slaps tariffs on Swiss gold, home to 70% of the world's refining. Okay. So another account that people don't like because, again, provides realistic takes. I'm not saying that everything TXMC Trades says is correct, but I appreciate people that actually go and dive into the information that they're looking at to be accurate about it. So here we go. The Fed did not float the idea of a Bitcoin reserve. They mentioned that revaluing gold has been floated as a way to create government cash flows without raising taxes. And in a tiny footnote, they mentioned that Cynthia Lummis wants to use gold for an SBR. Fed says nothing else about Bitcoin. And this right here is the alpha, right? The signal. No one reads source material. That's right. Bitcoiners used to read source material. And that would be part of their rebuttals, right? In order to be accurate. But that's gone out the window because Hopium and number go up and Michael Saylor and paper Bitcoin. So that's it. It doesn't matter anymore. We don't need truth. Now we just need bullshit that feels good. Anyways, this place is an echo chamber. Y'all just bounce misinformation off each other. Yep, he's absolutely correct. And I put a link in the show notes to the actual government document so that you can see it yourself. There is absolutely nothing in there about Bitcoin. They're not revaluing their gold in order to buy a bunch of Bitcoin. Trust me, I want this to happen. I'm a Bitcoiner. I'm just not going to lie to myself. Okay, that's the difference. And I don't think that you guys should lie to yourselves either. This is the footnote, by the way. This is the actual footnote from the document. Okay, in the US, the idea has come up in the context of helping to establish a strategic Bitcoin reserve or a sovereign wealth fund, and the use of revaluation proceeds was proposed in recent legislation. They literally, all they said was that it was proposed by Senator Lummis. There is absolutely nothing actionable about this, okay? Nothing actionable about this. Anyways, yeah, I feel bad, right? I don't want to be the killer of Hopium, but I also don't want to see my fellow Bitcoiners get completely wrecked, right? Thinking that all of these magical things are happening from one day to the next. They're not, okay? That's not what's actually happening. Anyways, okay. Now, bright spot of sunshine, right? Let's do it. Here we go. Steak and Shake. Right? Steak and Shake. These guys are probably playing the best retail game ever, right? Unlike the Bitcoin payment processors, Block, who couldn't seem to get payments up and running until all of a sudden they got shamed by Steak and Shake. That's my own personal opinion, of course. That's what I believe. In the second quarter of 2025, Steak and Shake same-store sales increased by 10.7%. That is beautiful. Bitcoin has been a game changer. Thank you, Bitcoiners. Bitcoin, burgers, and beyond. You know what? We got to take the wins when we get them, right? Excuse me. Sorry. I appreciate this. This is what I like to see. A business, right? A business that actually provides a product or service that people deem valuable. And guess what? They're accepting Bitcoin. That's really all it is. People talk about adoption and everything like that. And it's like, oh, what can I do? How can I do this? I need to create a business, that does something for Bitcoin. Literally, if you have a business already, all you need to do is learn to accept Bitcoin. And if you decide, pay people in Bitcoin. And then, of course, save in Bitcoin. It's really that simple. It really is. It's just a whole bunch of people overcomplicating it to make it seem like what they're doing is so much more amazing. Anyways, moving on, guys. There's more. There's the university's eating crow, right? Harvard, right? Harvard endowment invests 116 million in BlackRock Bitcoin ETF. Okay, you guys know what I'm going to say here, right? It's paper Bitcoin. Doesn't matter. It's the ETFs. Granted, step in the right direction. I'll take it, but it's not. They just hold shares. They just hold shares. But for me, what really matters is that they had to backstep. Okay, they had to backstep from, what was it, 6 years ago? Right? 6 years ago, a decade from now, Bitcoin is more, or maybe that's even more. Maybe it's like 7 years ago. Anyways, I can't read that date down there. I think it says 2018. Anyways, a decade from now, Bitcoin is more likely to be $100 than 100,000. Harvard economist says, right? And now look, Harvard endowment invests 116 million. Now, I did see some comments. There was a specific comment from Jim Chanos on X, essentially about how Bitcoiners are now happy about Harvard buying Bitcoin. So it's like, so before they were wrong and now they're right and now you're excited. It's like, no, you're missing the point. Okay, so nobody cares, right? Like, I don't care that Harvard's buying Bitcoin. What we need to look at is the message. What is the signal? This giant institution, okay, this giant institution has had no choice but to bend the knee to Bitcoin. Okay, they had no choice. That to me is the win. I don't care about Harvard all of a sudden realizing their mistake. Who cares? It's not about that. It's just about them bending the knee. And it's tough. It's a tough one, right? But every single one of these institutions at some point will end up following this pattern. Okay, guys, let's dive into the drama here. Let's do it. The OSMU drama. Okay, so first things first, let's start off with who is OSMU, right? OSMU is a community focused on Bitcoin mining and related hardware, particularly open source projects, specifically, right, things like the Nerd Axe, the Bitaxe, right? These solo miners that became increasingly popular over the last 2 years. OSMU also develops open source Bitcoin miners and related devices. Okay, so now at least we know what that organization does. So what exactly is happening here with OSMU? So essentially the claim, hold on a second here, guys. Sorry, because I've got so many screenshots for this. Okay, so the claim essentially is that, oh, sorry, not that screenshot. That one comes next. Anyways, so look, TLDR, the claim is that OSMU, okay, is charging resellers of the solo miners. They're charging a donation, right? When really it's a charge, right? So it's not a donation, it's actually a fee. However, obviously this story is not cut and dry, right? Because not everybody agrees with this, right? There's people that are there's people such as Crypto Cloaks, right, that believe that this is that this is actually it's a grift, right? And then there's also, right, people like Gober as well, who also think this, right? And here's Gober saying, "Hey Scott, please remove us from the list on bitaxe.org. We don't want to be associated with this donation grift. Bitcoin doesn't need Satoshi. Bitaxe doesn't need OSMU." So obviously that gets to be a little, this gets to be a little difficult. Now, somewhere in between all of this, right, is the truth. This is because, look, nothing is ever entirely cut and dry. Right. So it's like we got to figure out, okay, what exactly is happening. And let's go see here. I just want to see what this one is. Yeah, so here's the one from Crypto Cloaks, right? Just a reminder, OSMU is a scam, and if you don't follow the club's rules, you don't get to be on the legit sellers list of Bitaxes. Kind of that is actually not incorrect. Not incorrect here. I'll just share the window to make it easier, because otherwise I'm not gonna be able to see anything. Okay. So this is from, this is actually, okay, so Scott is one of the head guys. There's like 4 people that run OSMU, and this is what Scott had to say. Some sellers were removed from bitaxe.org sellers list after they added Bitaxe derivatives without providing the complete source. This has always been a requirement to be on the project website. Yeah, there is definitely a lot of drama going on. Crypto Cloaks also said here, OSMU is a fraud organization, and I hope you all can see through the grift of the 4 people who run it. Plebs in the community are actually standing up and asking basic questions, which Scott, the CEO, has never answered, or will ever answer. And he can't, because the fraud is real. This is somebody who donated some work to OSMU. And here we go. He's saying, hey, just discovered recently. Also interested on the transparency page is the mention of the Bitaxe 3D prints repo was funded by OSMU. For one thing, I simply did the work with another person for plebs and compiled the material, including much of my own work. Furthermore, I was neither mentioned, informed, nor compensated for any of the work. I'll repeat again, because it directly affects me. My work was neither acknowledged nor paid for by OSMU, nor was I informed. They simply took the repository that 2 plebs created and are now falsely advertising this work was financed. Okay. So look, I actually started reporting on this drama. I included it as part of the monthly episode that Ulrich and Humble and myself do. This was 2 episodes ago. So I'm not 100% convinced, right, that OSMU is indeed a fraud. However, some people that I have known in this space for almost 10 years who have actually never lied to me, and never steered me wrong, people like Rick from Crypto Cloaks, he tends to feel pretty strongly about this. So I am going to give him the benefit of the doubt in this. However, I do think that all of this can be solved pretty easily, right? Like just make a donation, an actual donation. Like, just don't force people to give it to you, and then it won't be seen as a fee. Right. And the other thing is that now the OSMU people like Scott and the other 3 people from OSMU, I saw there was a post indicating that all the donations that they've ever gotten have gone to a 2 of 3 multisig. You could see that they used a very small portion of the proceeds, and the majority of that Bitcoin is still sitting there. I mean, I don't have a problem with that. Maybe the reality is that they need to change, maybe they need to not call it a donation. Maybe they need to call it a fee, right? Like I can tell you, in certain professions, right, you actually have not necessarily a union, but like a certification board. Okay. And essentially these guys, right, it's somebody that you pay a fee to. It's not a donation. And then they offer specific services for that, for those fees. Like essentially representing all of you, let's say, to the government or, to whatever industry. So maybe that's what needs to be done, right? Maybe they just need to clarify what their real intention is, right? So maybe they do accept donations, but they also would need to actually charge a fee because of, whatever service it is that they're offering. I don't, again, I don't think it's a grift. I just think I think it's much more complicated than we'd like to imagine, right? Like open source. I believe that what we're seeing in Bitcoin are the challenges of open systems and people collaborating without the veil of corporations. It's quite possible, Anyways, I don't think it's over. I think this drama, unfortunately, is going to continue. I don't think it gets better. We are going to report on it. All right, absolutely. I am going to continue to report on it. It's just disappointing to see this. Right, this does remind me, even though it's not the same thing, it totally reminds me of Samurai versus Wasabi. Right, it totally reminds me of the privacy battles, and in the end, what happened was for me, I did not want to use either of their products because they both came across like spooks. And I was just soured by the whole entire, by the whole entire privacy space. And actually what I ended up doing was looking at Jam, right? Join Market, right? Because Join Market was completely open. It didn't have any of the drama. It was fantastic. Anyways. All right, guys, that's all I wanted to talk about today. I hope you have a wonderful rest of the day, and I will catch you all tomorrow. Peace.